Are you a high-performing parent, entrepreneur, or high achiever in pursuit of excellence? Welcome to The Nexus Podcast, a podcast custom tailored for families like ours, driven, affluent, and eager to lead extraordinary lives. From rockstar stay-at-home moms to high-producing CEOs, we choose to model success for everyone we are surrounded by. We prioritize health over sickness, embrace a vitalistic lifestyle, and seek to tap into the limitless potential that God has bestowed upon us. I'm Dr. Daniel Kimbley, your host, and on this podcast, we'll uncover the secrets to living a fulfilling and abundant life, where you and your loved ones can thrive physically, mentally, and spiritually. Together, we'll forge a path to greatness and unleash your God-given capabilities. Get ready to say yes to a life of true prosperity and well-being. This is The Nexus Podcast. What is up, fam? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And this week, I am super fired up to bring you something that happened to me in the office this week. And it really, every time I get triggered by something or someone makes me mad, I really am doing my best these days to figure out how can I learn something valuable from that lesson or that experience. And a lot of what I have done work on with myself specifically is trying to release my expectations that I have for other people. Obviously I'm gonna hold myself to a super high standard. I wanna hold everybody else to the same. But the reality is a lot of people just aren't ready to be held to that same standard. And that's okay. It's not a good thing or bad thing. It's not right or wrong. It just is what it is. And so this week in the office, we have someone who we take care of, and I'm trying to be very careful with my words so it doesn't sound like I'm calling this person out, but we have someone who we take care of who has been coming to us for a very, very short amount of time. And whether or not you've been in our office and you know this, we see people on a frequency that is extended over a period of time. Because what we know to be true about the brain is that the brain takes a certain amount of time to start to build up new patterns and new habits. This is called myelination within the brain and the nervous system. And so one of the things that we know is that it takes time to unwrap myelin or old pathways, and it takes time to build up new, healthier, different pathways. And if you doubt this at all for a second, I would just encourage you to go check out a YouTube time-lapse video of how neurons fire and wire together and how they don't. And you'll see something that's very interesting is that the big, thick, myelinated pathways that have been there for a long time, almost never break down. While the really thin ones that have been there for a short amount of time will break down really quickly and they can build up somewhere else pretty fast. So the reason I share this with you is because I started thinking about this person who's been with us for a very short amount of time and having amazing results, literally suffering for the last year. If I told you all the details, which I can't on this episode, because again, I don't want to call this person out, but literally having insanely good results and been suffering for the last year and way, way, way too young to be suffering at all. For any amount of time, in my opinion, just because we know how the brain functions and how the body was designed by God to be healthy and express it 100% full out. So, neither here nor there. The reason I share this with you is because this person, amazing results, decided, you know what, it takes too much time. I can't fit time in my schedule to come anymore. And you've heard me talk about I'm too busy, and that conversation on other episode of the podcast. But the reason that I wanted to bring it to you today is because I think about commitments and what we are committed to as human beings and what it actually means to be committed to something. Because a lot of times what I see is that people will commit to something just long enough to see a sliver of change, and then they give up on it and they revert back to all their old patterns. And this is exactly what's going to happen with this person's brain. My heart actually bleeds because I know what's going to come, and they're going to be right back to where they were just a few weeks ago because they never gave their body a chance to fully adapt and make the change necessary within the neural pathways within the brain. And so again, that's every person's choice, and the point isn't to call this person out, but the idea is there of this idea of commitments, right? And so then I started thinking about myself, and I'm well, what am I committed to? And what have I been committed to? And what are my habits and patterns and routines when we talk about commitment? And the reality is being committed to something is great, and taking the action to that commitment is a whole other thing. And so, I'll give you an example of myself. Is I used to love 75 Hard. I think it was so good for people, and not saying that it's bad. Andrew Frizzell is amazing, but one of the things I see with 75 Hard is people go 75 hard, and they'll destroy themselves for 75 days. And then what they do is they fall completely off because they push themselves so hard one way that then their commitment completely falls and they lose everything that they gained over the 75 days. And the reality is if you know Andy's program and his actual program, it's designed to be done over the course of a whole year. Not just the 75 hard, but the things that come after that. And it's very challenging, but the reason he set it up that way is because the dude is so smart and he understands that 75 days is not enough time to make an actual change in your body. And if you give up on day 76, you'll start to slowly fade back into your old patterns, and they'll creep in, and then you wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror a year from now and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the exact same person even though I look great while I was doing 75 hard. And again, this isn't good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just a conversation about commitment and the way that the brain makes connections and like makes lasting connections or connections that are just very, very short-lived. And so, you know, for this person, like I know, Andy Frisella knows, like 75 hard, you name what it is, right? It's like nobody goes to the gym for 1 month, gets a six-pack. You can't even go to the gym for 1 month and get a six-pack for most people anyway, and then quit and go back to eating fast food. Like nothing worth doing works that way. Like I've never known someone who's like, oh, I'm gonna build $1 million business and I'm gonna be so committed to it and then it's just gonna fall apart. And like, because the reality is like anything, whether it's in your body, whether it's in your spirituality, whether it's in your finances, like whether it's in your relationships, things that take change take long-term commitment. And so, you know, I get so many people who are going to probably be haters and be like, oh, you just want people to stick around forever. Yeah, I want people to stick around long enough to actually make a change within their system. Instead of throwing away money, trying to chase just a little bit of a symptom to go away. And then when the symptom goes away, they're like, oh, no, I don't have time anymore. I can't make the time. Can't make the time for myself. I'm not committed to myself anymore. I'm more committed to doing all these other things that are actually running me down in the first place and making me broken. And then because I'm broken, now I'm going to have to chase something else because the thing that I tried the first time never worked, but it actually really worked 100% very, very, very well. And we have the data to show that. But the problem is that you didn't work. Like, because you never made the commitment long enough to stick it out and actually see what changes could be possible long term. And like, oh, I get so fired up. You feel me like bringing this heat. And the reason that I'm bringing it, like I think about how medicine works, right? It's like people thinking that if I don't have a problem, then I'm healthy. And I've literally sat in my office multiple times over the course of just this year of 2024 and heard people's stories of like, I was perfectly healthy and then I had a heart attack. I was perfectly healthy and then I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It's like the problem is with the thinking of the mainstream medical model is that just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean that you are healthy, because the stage 4 cancer was previously stage 3, was previously stage 2, was previously stage 1. There was a process taking place within your body long before you ever knew there was a symptom. And it's the same with back pain, it's the same with headaches, it's the same with skin issues, it's the same with digestive issues, it's the same with anxiety, it's the same with ADHD, it's the same with kiddos who come in with autism diagnoses or ADD diagnoses or like learning disabilities or dyslexia, or kiddos who have colic or kiddos who have digestive issues. Like the list could literally go on and on and on. You name a symptom, before the symptom was there was something happening underneath. And the point isn't even to get into the chiropractic piece of this and like how we help people with all that stuff, but it's to just think about this idea of commitment and committing to something. What we are committed to in our office is getting people to commit enough to themselves to stick it out for the long term so that they can actually make a change that sticks within their bodies. Just like 75 hard, just like the gym wants you to do, just like you got to do if you want to continue to eat healthy and eat clean and have your body look some semblance of fit in the first place. It's like all of those things take a long-term commitment. And there's so many places that I think about this concept of long-term commitments and like people just looking for the quickest fix possible and then realizing like 4 weeks later, 8 weeks later, they're like, oh my gosh, this thing works so well, I'm gonna jump to the other thing. Or oh my gosh, this thing works so well for this amount of time, but then I completely give it up and then I'm frustrated that the thing that I committed to for only 4 weeks never worked in the first place. It's like nothing that I can think of could you commit to for a very, very short amount of time and actually make a lasting change within your life. And the question then becomes is like, where does this carry over? Like, what does this look like? Not just with the physical body thing and like chiropractic and the way we work with people we do inside of our office, but what does it look like in business? Like, what does it look like for somebody who says, I'm committed to doing X, Y, Z in my business, and they commit to it just long enough to see a little bit of result, and then And then because they start getting the result, they're like, oh, that thing doesn't work anymore. And then they jump to the next thing. And then they wonder why like no change ever happens. Or they say, oh, I'm too busy to commit to that anymore. I saw a little tiny bit of a result. I boosted my income 10%. Now I'm just going to go on and I'm going to do something else because that thing didn't really work that well in the first place. Or I got my benefit from it. And then they backslide and it's back to the exact same place. I see this in like business all the time with people. And it doesn't even have to be business. If you're not a business owner, like think employees, right? I know so many people who are like, I deserve a raise, and you're committed to wanting to get a raise, but there's no action that actually allow you to get that thing in the first place. And so the same is true with like, if we think about business and we think about how you make money in our physical bodies, right? Like how many times do we do something like, I'll use myself as an example, I do 75 hard. I go all in, I take the before and after pictures, I look amazing in the after pictures, and then on day 76, I'm like, cheat meal, I'm eating pizza, because I wasn't committed to actually doing something that was going to sustainably allow me to like get a real result inside of my life. This past year, literally from January of 2023, it's actually December of 2022 to today, which is February of 2024, one of the things that I've committed to is not a 75 hard protocol, but a 365 all-in commitment to eating clean and tracking and counting and measuring and weighing all my food all the time, 100% of the time. That is a commitment. And guess what? My body looks different than it ever has ever in my life. I have more muscle, my abs are more ripped, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can see in my physical body. I have more energy, like there's so many things that I see, but it came from commitment. It came from not just a 75 hard commitment, but a 365 plus commitment. And I'll continue to do it because I realize that the compounding results of the 365 days has now made this such a habit in me that like every time I go to the kitchen, I just automatically weigh my food. I had a snack right before I sat down to record this podcast, and it didn't even cross my mind to the fact that like grab the scale, grab the little cup that I weigh my stuff in, dump the stuff in the cup, and then I snack on it and eat it, and I know exactly what I ate and I put it in the app. And it takes an extra 5 seconds to do, but it's because I built it as a habit, because I've been so committed to it. So that's just one example of physical body. It could be walking every day. It could be going to the gym every day. Like it's gonna be different for you because I don't have the same goals as you. But what I know is that if you commit to it, if you can commit to a 365, like that's way more challenging, but also way more rewarding than sticking to just a 75-day protocol. So that's in the body side. If we look at like balance in our relationships, think about the commitment. Like I'll give you a perfect example of this. Heather and I, we did a fast starting at the beginning of January. And one of the things that we fasted was social media. So we've been fasting social media, but the other thing that we did, we decided that we weren't gonna watch mindless TV at the end of the night. We were actually gonna sit and we were gonna chat and we were gonna communicate with each other. And so like if we would have just stopped at the end of the fast, which was like 3 weeks long, we for sure, I can already feel it trying to want to slip back in where it's like, it's so easy to just watch an episode. And like, because we didn't make the long-term commitment yet to actually seeing the real change that came from this short-term thing of our relationship and how much more powerful our communication's been, how much more powerful our connection's been, how much more powerful and understanding we are of each other. And the same can be true with any relationship. You don't have to be married in order to experience that, but it's like, is it your parents? Is it your kids? Is it your boyfriend? Is it your girlfriend? Is it your wife? Is it your husband? Maybe it's an employer, coworker, or somebody that you mentor. Like there's a million different relationships that we have on a day-to-day basis, and making commitment to allowing those to actually change longer than a 30-day, longer than a 2-week, longer than a 75-day. But like this idea that in order to change the brain, we have to do things for long term. And then lastly, in spirituality, again, like not to talk about myself, but I just use it because it's the most relevant example that I know of, is that for the last 244 days straight, that's 40 weeks without missing a single day, I have been reading the Bible, journaling on it every single day, non-negotiable. The question is why? It's because I wanted to build a closer connection to God. My prayer has changed. The way that I look at the Lord, the way that I understand the Bible and the stories in the Bible and what they're trying to teach me, the way that I hear the Lord speak to me, the way that I get to serve people and show up for people, the way that this morning when the guy wasn't going to let me in traffic when I'm zooming on the highway, like trying to merge in, and it's a merge lane anyway, and the dude wouldn't let me over and then honks at me and flips me off, is like my blood is boiling, but instead I'm just like, nope. that's not how I should act. Like that, I shouldn't flip them off. I shouldn't go to that level, right? And I'm not saying I'm perfect with it, but what I'm saying is like, because I committed to a different spirituality, because I committed to being more in line with someone who God would be proud of, like my actions are different. And that didn't come from reading the Bible for 30 days. That didn't come from doing one study of the book of Job. It came from a commitment for 244 days plus to get to the point where I am. And again, it's not about me. The whole point is about you, is like understanding that like what are you committed to? Are you committed to just scraping by, to just getting enough of a result where your life is like gonna kind of be changed and then you just slip back the other way and then you complain that it didn't work and it never works out for you and everything's always bad and nothing's worked before? Or are you the person who's gonna be committed all in 244 days straight? Like I could talk about the podcast. I just got asked to be on someone's podcast. Actually, I've been asked to be on 2 podcasts this week. And one of the things that came up is people like, dude, you're such a good speaker. And I don't really feel like I'm that great of a speaker. I get passionate about what I talk about because I love talking about chiropractic. I love seeing people be successful. But I was like, dude, guess what? When I first started my podcast, the podcast was for nothing more than for me to get another opportunity to speak about things that I am passionate about and hopefully help one other person. One other person. That's led into literally over 250 episodes, weekly episodes every single week for the last nearly 6 years. Like, yes, of course that's going to have payoff because I've been committed to a process. And I would just have you consider this, is like, where in your life do you say that you're committed, but then your commitment quickly fades as soon as you get the little taste of the result? Or are you all in committed where you can actually make the change that makes it sustainable for you to do and be a part of for a lifetime? Because I know for me, I'm tired of chasing the next quick fix and the next quick hack, and I want to be committed to being on fire as a human being, having the deep level of passion and commitment and drive and desire and motivation that God intended for us to have. And for me, all of that comes from the frontal cortex of the brain, which is directly influenced by the chiropractic adjustment. So my friends, where are you committed? Where do you say you're committed, but then fall off as soon as you get one little taste of the result, like the client that I'm talking about? And now all of a sudden, magically, because they got one little taste of change, they're too busy, and I know, like, my heart breaks for them because I know that it's going to come right back, and they're going to be right back in the same situation. And it's just like, to me, it just makes no sense. It's like this level of commitment to being the best version of you takes just that. It takes commitment. So my friends, I love you. I hope you got some value out of it, and I'll come at you again next week. Peace.